I think that when we value something in our society, we spend money on it. And often this is not, well, it is reflected in the cycling communities, but I think we kind of prize ourselves on being a cheap date. And and you know, it's great in your own life if you can sort of be minimal and get by with very little and make, you know, your tube last 10 times. You can go through like and patch it. But in the wider world, it doesn't necessarily translate it. So I think we sort of have to think, how can we impress? Not so much to impress upon the world, but it does sort of equate to that. So I think money kind of talks, and we need to have a grander vision and think of all the ways we can spend money and then figure out how much to ask for and ask for it. One observation that I have about Canada in relation to Vancouver, I think has a lot of great ingredients for becoming a cycling city, and Sean, I think he outlined them in your discussion. I learned of a few more, and especially that you're getting support from all these municipalities that they're really wanting to participate. So we have good infrastructure here. We have a wonderful climate. We do have the beginnings of understanding on the road. Our mode share is increasing, so we're seeing more people. We have a good, strong cycling culture, but we don't have a strong federal advocacy movement in Canada, and that's something that I've observed going to the States this spring. We went to Washington, D.C., and there was a national bike summit. And so what that is all the bike advocates from the States go, they have a couple days of meetings, and they go lobby their federal government, and they go to their congressperson and they lobby them. And they also come together as a country and advocates, and they talk to each other and they learn from each other. And we do have a federal trade organization called Bicycle Trade Association of Canada, but we don't really have a strong federal cycling movement or lobby, and I think that is an important thing. I think we need to improve the federal level, so I think that's one way to get money. And the League of American Bicyclists has this figure of, they've sort of tracked how much money the American federal government has put into cycling since like 86 or something, but from 88 to 2008. In 88, they had $6.6 million on the federal level that was spent for like bicycling and walking improvements. And then it's increased over that time gradually, so that in 2008, 10 years later, they had $541 million. Now that's, I think it's like 80 times. So that's not 80 times, that's like 80 times the number, which means that they've spent like over the last 10 years, something like $4 billion or $4 or $5 billion on improving cycling and walking. So I know that's the U.S. It's a U.S. example, but I just wanted to give some examples of money stuff that I think is really important. And here's another city example. The city of Boulder in the early 90s spent as much money on bicycle infrastructure as they spent on car infrastructure. And the city of Boulder now has incredible infrastructure. A friend of mine was there recently, and she was like, well, I didn't get the really strong cultural feeling, but it was easy to ride. So that's one thing. And also the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, we look at them as, this is a great cycling city. They have a mode share of about 40% of cycle trips. And there was a report that someone had on one of the listservs that said in 2000, different cities around in the Netherlands spent between 30 to 50% of their small infrastructure budget on cycling facilities. So I think that if you put a higher proportion of your infrastructure spending into this stuff, you get those high numbers. That's one of the ingredients that gets you these higher numbers of riders. And so Vancouver, the city of Vancouver is doing something great. They just doubled their infrastructure spending. It's now $3.4 million, and they've done that by reallocating funds from cars. But when that announcement was made, they said, but 98% of the infrastructure funding is still dedicated to cars. So I don't know what the percentage is that they're spending on bikes. And someone will figure that out. For our Vancouver article in January. How much time do I have? A minute?
Yeah, another few minutes.
Okay.
Keep going. Yeah.
Okay. But I thought those examples were important because I think the money is a really important ingredient that we need in order to become a great cycling city here. We also need to be members of organizations like the BACC, and we need to support our cycling organizations. In Toronto, they have a cycling union, and they're gathering together. In San Francisco, they have the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition, and they have 10,000 members there. I know that the BACC does not yet have 10,000 members, but they're working hard to get there. So what we need to do is all join and ask our friends to join, and then they have a strong voice when they go. So I think that's another thing that's very important, that we have strong representation and we become members of our cycling organizations. So if we were to spend this money in places, the League of American Bicyclists also has 4 E's that I think are kind of useful to say, like, there's several areas where you need to focus your attention to be a great cycling city, and those are engineering and education and encouragement and enforcement. So engineering. We need to build facilities for cyclists of all ages, from 8 to 80. And we do have good facilities here, but I would say I don't think that I would go cycling comfortably with a 10-year-old riding on their bike with me in the downtown. So I think that if we look at the ability of the cyclist, like just listening to you talk about London, we have to plan for that. Like, it's not a sport activity, it's a transportation activity. So we need to think of a whole range of abilities when we make cycling facilities. And then the education, I think we need to educate drivers about, when you see a cyclist on the road, what they do, and educate ourselves as cyclists about riding safely. And we need to invest in that education. It's not something that we can depend on volunteers to do. I think that the volunteers and the advocates in the city get burnt out because they work like crazy on tiny budgets. And so we need to invest in that culture and that education. And encouragement. So culture. Things like Momentum Magazine, things like Bike to Work Week, things like a citywide bike summit. If the city were to put on a summit and bring together all the organizations that have something to do with cycling, and just make connections within the city, meet each other. Sometimes we're very fragmented here, and I think that we could improve on that. Enforcement, maybe that's an important one as well, so that in whatever laws that we agree we want to have around cycling and around driving, that they're paid attention to. And so my own personal, I'm going to throw in a couple ideas, and I'm hoping that we'll have our conversation about what you think we need to become a cycling city. So I just made a couple of my own. What I think we could do, a couple things. The bike summit I think would be really fun. And I think we should remove the mandatory helmet bylaw, because I think it stops people from getting on their bikes. I think we should build a community center for cycling in our city that would house a number of organizations like the BACC, like Momentum, maybe other cycling promotion organizations could find a home there. There could be a big bike parking shelter. There could be a repair and rental facility for cycling. There could be a bookstore information hub for tourists who want to get around the city by bike. We could have a builder's bicycle craftsman shop, so we could demonstrate the craft of bicycle building with Sam Whittingham showing us how to braze or something cool. So a cultural community center around biking would help make us a great bike city. And I think one thing I would say to the city council, when they try to do things like have a car-free streets day or a cyclovia, I think what they need to do is put that in context of what other cities around the world are doing, because I think they're trying things, but they're not necessarily showing the people of Vancouver where the precedent is being set as well. So if they say in New York, there's a pedestrian mall on Broadway, and these changes are being made in other cities. So I think we need to help educate Vancouverites that we're just part of a movement. We're not doing crazy bike things.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you.